Welcome to Board Game Binge, the place where we bring you bite-sized, bingeable board game content from across the industry. I'm your host, James Staley, and in this episode, we're chatting with Frank West, a game designer based out of Bristol, England, who publishes through his company, The City of Games. In 2017, Frank successfully funded the City of Kings game through Kickstarter and has continued publishing expansions and games leading up to the most recent viral hit, The Isle of Cats. Frank, welcome to the Binge. How you doing?
Yeah, I'm very well. How are you doing today?
I am doing great. I know I said this just before you went live, but I absolutely love the artwork on this game. I'm sure this is something you hear quite a bit from people. That just that box, it just sucks you in.
It's certainly one of the things I strive to try and do is make sure that our boxes just stand out. And with all of them, I'm a big fan of having the white box or the black box with that piece of art in the middle, rather than the more traditional approach of the whole box being the piece of art. And I just feel like it stands out more and it really draws your eye to it, which I'm personally a big fan of that kind of approach.
Yeah, it's got that kind of minimalistic kind of vibe to it, right? So just for the people listening or watching, I'm going to go through some quick stats here because these numbers are actually quite staggering. And I'll go through kind of all the campaigns. So you've got kind of three big ones that you had on Kickstarter: the City of Kings, which hit £283,000, City of Kings expansion, Ancient Allies in Vadoran Gardens. That Kickstarter hit £362,000. Yep. Isle of Cats, £468,000. So if anybody's doing the quick math in their head, you've done about £1.1 million, which I think has got to be close to $2 million Canadian. 15,486 backers. You have been crushing it on Kickstarter. Congratulations.
Thank you. It's funny when you launch a Kickstarter, especially for the first time, you never really know what to expect, right? And we all dream big. We always assume that it's going to burn and fail, and then you kind of end up somewhere in the middle. And I was very lucky and happy to just to jump in high and to be able to keep going up from there. It's a real privilege that a lot of people haven't really managed to kind of do, and I feel very grateful for that.
We're going to get into that a little bit later on because I want to dig down deeper on that, because for the most part, a lot of campaigns, if somebody hits 30, 40,000, I mean, that's a great success for the first campaign. Yeah. And then it kind of, with their knowledge and, experience, it kind of ladders up over time. But you hit some pretty big numbers right out of the gate. Before we get there, I got to know, what is your background? Like, you've been doing this for what, about 6 years now, I guess?
Yeah, it's always hard to know when I started, because it was always something that was a hobby for a long time on and off, and then it eventually evolved into actually becoming a profession. And really, I've enjoyed gaming my whole life. I was mainly a video gamer when I was younger. And when I kind of grew up, I did computer science, and I loved the idea of designing video games, and I played around designing games all the time. And around kind of 10 years ago, I guess, getting on for 10 years ago, I discovered board games and really kind of started getting into it. And, I'd played Magic the Gathering and the odd thing before that, but this was when I really started getting into the hobby and started understanding these games existed. And the more I played them, the more I realized that it wasn't a board game like Monopoly or something that I would come to expect, but they were more like video games. They were more advanced. You had difficulty settings, you had cooperative, you had competitive, you had short games, you had levels, and all of those attributes that I'd kind of considered video game things, I started to realize were also approachable in a board game kind of sense. And this is where I started taking my love for video games and trying to design a board game in the way that I'd originally designed video games. And for a few years, it was just like a hobby of playing around, to a point where I had an idea which I really liked, and it started becoming more and more of a thing. And that eventually evolved into the City of Kings, which was my first game. But really, it was just a very natural evolution from just playing video games to falling into board games to wanting to create games. And that's really the kind of the starting point, I suppose.
Were you doing like video game design before that, or what was your career kind of prior to the game industry?
To an extent. I originally did a lot of programming, and then I did
Okay.
a lot of technical consultancy for kind of like big businesses, helping develop systems. But my passion was always games. So I was one of these people who, I'd go to work 9 till 5, I'd get home and I would code 6 till 2 a.m., like doing my own stuff. I'd sleep for 4 hours, repeat 7 days a week. And it was trying to make my own video games and just little apps, not big things, but just something. And I played around with lots of different small video games. I then went and worked with someone for a while on a bigger video game, but it never was like, it never really kicked off. It was always that thing where you always needed more time. You always needed more people, because the size of the games that I was trying to make were not one person games. They were 20-person team games. And when you get to board game design, you realize that you can create a whole board, like the scope is much smaller. So it's much more manageable as one person or two people. And that was why I think that I've been successful with board games, but never really got anywhere with video games.
It's a lot more tactile, I think, too, right? So
Yes.
if you want to have a tile, you draw it on a computer, you print it out, or you can even grab clip art if you're doing something very rudimentary, cut it with scissors and put it on the table, and it's done. We're programming ones and zeros, programming language and things like that have got to be a lot more complex. So when you created City of Kings, how long was it before you had like a game that you were playing with friends and family, something you've created to the point where you said, you know what, I think I'm going to take a shot at Kickstarter, like, or was it designed straight to Kickstarter? Like what was that gap?
It's kind of hard to put an exact time on it, but it was a couple of years from day one to Kickstarter. And a big part of this was because I did that thing that a lot of people do, which is one of the biggest mistakes you can make when you first design a game, which was I didn't want to show it to anyone until it was finished. So I just iterated it so much. And me and my girlfriend just worked on it together, and we didn't want to show other people. And then, a year later, when we're finally feeling brave enough to like put it out into the world, you start to learn a lot more, and you start to realize there's a lot you need to do differently. So it was probably a good year of just me and my partner just playing around as a fun thing. Then as more people started getting involved with play testing, it started to become much more refined and started to feel more like an actual board game, right? It was much more the experience you would come to get. And I think after probably 18 months to 2 years was the point where I started thinking, well, actually, maybe I should look for someone to do some artwork and maybe start looking into how can we make this nicer. So the first goal really became, how do we just have our own copy? How do we make one game? How do we make something that's got artwork that looks great? I can put it on my shelf, and in 50 years time, I can have my grandkid on my knee and go, hey, look, I made this 50 years ago. This was a thing I did. And then once we got the artwork in place, it just started to evolve into, actually, maybe other people might like this. People enjoy it. People are excited by it. I was actively blogging online. The following started to kind of slowly grow up a lot more, but people started following me on Twitter and on Board Game Geek. You could see the subscriber count for the game slowly going up. And it was all these signals that actually maybe this is something that could become that little bit bigger. But I never really knew what to expect. When we went live, I think the first goal we had was about 28,000 pounds or something like that. So,
Wow.
$50,000. And you kind of sit there and you just think, my goodness, if we hit that, then we're going to be happy. And we hit it within the first, I think it was within the first 24 hours or something. It might have been 36 hours, but it was so quick, that you just kind of were like, huh,
shell shocked a bit.
What's going to happen now, and I like to plan for everything. So I'd plan for best case and worst case, but it was nice to kind of be like, right, let's open the best case scenario folder and throw away the other two. We're going out and just doing what we can. But even then, you still didn't know what was going to happen. When the Kickstarter was finished, was that going to be it? Was it going to get into retail? Were we going to make other games? I always have this fear of being like a one-trick pony, someone who you do one thing and then you're done. So it's only now, 4 years later, I guess, where I'm actually starting to feel maybe I'm in this industry now, and I've actually kind of got my foundations in place, and it's kind of something that I can consider a long-term kind of job as well as kind of a passion. But it's still very scary, even today. I'm not confident when I launch new projects. It's kind of the most nerve-wracking thing you can do, apart from launch your first project, is launch your second project, right? It's just as much of a fear.
My brother today actually said to me, because people know that I'm working on a game right now. It's going to come out in about a month on Kickstarter. He said, "Hey, how are you feeling about the game?" I said, "I feel like I'm going to puke." Like, it's it is a highly anxious position to put yourself in, but it's very rewarding, right? And I think that's the hook, or that's the addiction, right? Is that you there's so much risk involved, and the chance of failure is quite high. But man, if you can make it work, what a feeling, right? What a feeling.
It is.
Yeah.
It's like, I always say that your Kickstarter, like when it's live, that like 30 days or however long you have it live, is like an entire lifetime in 30 days. You have like the birth, you have the growing, you have the boring years, and then you have kind of the death at the end, and it's the big kind of bang. And it's such a thrill, and also so terrifying, because you go through every emotion. Like, I'd always say there's days where like I'm crying my eyes out, and days where I'm laughing and cheering and celebrating. Like, it's just such a roller coaster. And it doesn't matter. It's one of those things I think a lot of people say is, oh, you see this person who's running a Kickstarter that's made like £1 million, or a person who's run a Kickstarter making £1,000. And actually those emotions are still there. They're just on a much grander scale. And it's not the same feeling of making, 10 grand or 20 grand, but you still have those same fears of, well, what happens if I wake up tomorrow and everyone's left? What happens if I post an update and suddenly people don't like what I said? You've still got this constant battle, which could go either way. And until it's finished and it's closed and everyone's locked in, you just never know what's going to happen.
Did you get City of Kings in retail? So is it selling at retail right now?
So I'm quite, I guess, different to a lot of people in my approach to a lot of these things. So I'm not someone who likes to chase people. I'm someone who likes to get known and then let people kind of come to me when the time is ready. So for my retail and distribution for the City of Kings, it was something that didn't happen straight away, because I never contacted a single distributor. So in my last 4 years, I have never reached out to a distributor, but now I'm in distribution with 20 different distribution companies.
Wow.
And that is one of those things where it's very nerve-wracking, right? Because you feel every day like, I need to send that email, I need to get in front of them. But what I tried to do was I tried to make sure that they noticed me. I tried to make sure that I did things that would get their attention. And for me, a lot of people say, how do you get into retail? How do you get into distribution? How do you email this person? What do you say? And in my head, it's, if you're emailing someone and saying, hey, look at me, my thing's great, then you're on the back foot. But if you can get in front of them organically and make them go, what's that? Then you're already winning, and you've got a much better kind of battle for that kind of negotiation. And it's a hard technique to do, but it's certainly the way that I've done it. And it took a while with the City of Kings, but now those relationships are there. Obviously, things like the Isle of Cats.
So give us an example of something you did there to get them to notice you. What's something you've done?
So one thing which I did was, at conventions, I made sure that we had a really, really good looking booth, because we had people come past our booth and look at the artwork. And I like to surround myself with these big giant banners of artwork. I don't have logos. If you see any of my booths at a convention, you will never see my company logo. You'll never see the game logos apart from on the boxes. It's all about artwork, because I want people to be curious. I want people to say, what's this, and like it, and have to come in. And then, when the distributors do come and speak to you, or that kind of initial thing comes in, you kind of have to look out for them, because often if you've got a few people around a table and there's someone who is kind of stood back and they're kind of watching, and you can tell that they're really listening in, and maybe they've got like a, you know, exhibitor badge or like a badge that says that they're not just a everyday person, you can start to kind of tailor what you're saying to make sure you include things they might be interested in. And then when that conversation happens, you just have to be brave. So the City of Kings which was my first game.
Yeah.
This was the big selling point for me, right? My game had a 28-page rule book and then a 16-page like reference booklet. So it was
So you had a novel.
50 pages of rules, right? This is not a small thing.
Yeah.
The box itself weighs about 7 or 8 pounds. So, you know, 3 or 4 kilograms. And it was this big thing, and it takes up a huge amount of space. So when I had the first US distributor come to me and they said, do you want to send us a copy? Like, we'd be interested. I said to them, you know, can I show it to you? Because I'd always rather show someone it in person than have them open it in a box. Mm-hmm. And they said, we've only got 5 minutes because then we're going to another meeting. And I said, so I literally turned around and said, get a stopwatch out, time 5 minutes, and I guarantee you within 5 minutes, you'll be playing the game and you'll understand how it works. Mm-hmm. And they just kind of looked at it and were like, this game is too big. We can't be doing that. So we sat down, I taught them, and 3 minutes and like 20 seconds, they were doing their first turn. Mm-hmm. And when their alarm went off for 5 minutes, one of them got up and said, I'm going to cancel our next meeting. And since then, they've bought over 50,000 games from me. So, wow. You know, that was a gamble, but I was confident. I knew my product, you know, I knew the game, I knew the setting point. And the setting point of the City of Kings is if you know the game, you can teach it in a few minutes. And that's something that a lot of these games don't have. So for them, they took note. They saw the artwork, they were curious, they came over, I identified them, and then I sold them the game through a way that they wouldn't expect it to be sold.
That's confidence.
It was scary. I won't lie. I mean, my chair was a little bit sweaty by the end of it. But
yeah, no kidding. Good God. With the Isle of Cats, and not to alarm, I'm going to share the screen here for people that are actually watching the interview live. Again, the artwork is amazing. You hit 467,000, almost $468,000 or pounds, I guess, which is even higher in dollars. What was one of the things that really kind of took you to the next level? Because although you start off really high on City of Kings, this one was almost double what you did on City of Kings. So what was some of the key learning, or was something different that you did on this campaign that you didn't do on your prior campaigns?
So the City of Kings was always a passion project, which was the game I designed for myself and then turned it into something that other people could play. With the Isle of Cats, I started the journey with what is a game that I want that doesn't exist that I also think other people want. So it was actually much more of a thinking of what is the market, what is the space. And at the time, and it's different now, you know, other people obviously thought the same, but at the time, the two spaces were polyomino games, so these Tetris-like games where you're placing kind of tiles onto a board. There were lots of very quick ones, you know, 15-minute, 20-minute games. There was a Feast for Odin, which is like an hour-and-a-half game, but there was no medium weight, you know, Wingspan level, Everdell level, kind of 60-minute polyomino game that's a little bit more thinky, but isn't too much. So that was kind of what I went for. And then alongside that, it was also, I'm very passionate about cats. I love cats. Cats are also a creature that naturally fit well with polyomino tiles because of the way cats kind of stretch out and position themselves. And I also focused on the fact that back then, if you said to someone cat game, they thought of things like Exploding Kittens. Like cat games were always party games. They're always city games. They weren't the big highlight of the night. So the Isle of Cats was focusing on what kind of game didn't exist, medium weight polyominoes. What theme did I feel was popular, but hadn't necessarily been tackled in that medium weight kind of area? And then the third element is, what game do I want and how do I kind of want to play something? Because you have to personally be passionate about the game if you're going to launch it in the way that I did. So that was the starting point with this one.
Now you had a family-friendly mode
Mhm.
that you mentioned, I think, in this campaign that you did do in other campaigns. Could you explain a little bit what that is?
Yeah, so with the City of Kings, I said, was always a bigger, kind of more heavy game. But what amazed me is because it was a cooperative game, the amount of people that wanted to play it with their children, the amount of people that played it with their kids to teach them maths and kind of basic stuff. And when the Isle of Cats kind of came out, the fear that I had was how many people are going to see these cute cats on a shelf and pick it up thinking they can play it with their kids and realize that it's too complicated and it's too big a game.
Yeah.
So in the end, I thought I need it to work for both. I want it to work for the gamers, but it needs to also work for everybody. So I created two different rule sets. And when you open the game, you get the 20-page rule book for the Isle of Cats, and then you get a single A4 page, which is double-sided, which gives you the entire game for playing with kind of young children. And the trick here was that the advanced game, the core kind of game, all of the rules are the same in the family version. So you don't change how something works. It just adds layers to it. So if you
Mhm.
play the family version and then you want to play the core game, you don't need to change the way you think. You understand how scoring works. You understand how placement works. What you've got to learn is kind of like resource management and card drafting and the more complex kind of gamer kind of concepts within that game. But the family version for me has been such a great thing because now the game works for young children. It works for kind of really hardcore gamers, but it also works as the perfect kind of gateway game. Because if you're playing with
Yeah.
someone who's not into games or hasn't played many, you can play the family version. And then it makes it really easy to upgrade them to the more advanced version because they know half of the rules. And once they've got to the advanced version, they now understand resource management. They now understand card drafting. They now understand some of these basic concepts. So you can move them on to other games. And it gives it a really nice kind of 1, 2, 3 step approach to kind of getting them more into the hobby.
Now you had a solo mode, I believe, in this as well, right?
Yes.
Now, was that planned from the beginning, or is that something that, getting into your campaign, you start, there's a decision, okay, maybe we should create a solo mode for the people looking for
It was always
to
the
get to know?
plan. As I kind of said earlier, with like, what was it that I felt was the gap in the market with the polyomino games, medium weight, and the cat theme? One of the other parts of that was what boxes do I want to tick? And for me, two of those boxes were a solo mode and then also the ability for people to play with 5 and 6 players,
Mm.
because 2 to 4 is always the focus. And I
Yeah.
wanted to hit both ends of that. And the solo mode, again, having done the City of Kings and it's a cooperative game, so many people played it solo that it really put me in touch with how important that solo kind of side was. And the challenge with the Isle of Cats is because it's a polyomino game where you're putting these tiles onto a board, creating like an AI, like a self-running player that can fill its own board and populate a board is like the most horrendous task, right? It's so difficult. So I actually sat down for 2 to 3 months to design the solo mode for that game specifically to come up with a solution that I felt made it a proper solo game where you felt like you were playing against another player. It wasn't just a case of how many points you can get. You actually have someone who's fighting against you. And one game, you might get 10 points and they might get 12. The next game, you might get 80 points and they might get 60. But it's all about that battle of how you do better than them rather than just what's the most optimal thing that you can do, which to me makes a solo game more interesting.
Did you reach out to any solo groups at all, or some of these? Because even on Facebook, there's tons of groups dedicated
Yes.
to solo. So you got the opinions of other people to kind of
So
weigh in and.
not for the design side of it. Like from the design side of it, I really wanted to explore the new approaches because I'm a real big fan of come up with something and then see how other people do it. Because
Mm.
if you spend too much time just looking at what other people do, you end up copying them and you stop being innovative. So I felt like doing it the way I did it has created a solo mode that is so different to how other solo modes work.
Yeah.
But obviously, once you've got to that point, you need to validate it, right? You can't just say, hey, I've created something brand new that's better than everyone else. So you kind of have to say, I've got a cool idea. I think it works. How do people feel? And at that point, I kind of took it to a solo community, and it worked really well.
There's risk there as well, right? So if you're
Yes.
coming at it from a very different, innovative approach, it's good because it's different and it's innovative. Can be bad if it's unfamiliar, right? And I think that sometimes in the industry, there's a resistance for people to try doing things completely different because there's this fear that there's going to be resistance from people not adopting it as easily as maybe something that they're already used to.
And I think,
sorry,
go on.
No, I insist.
Okay. And I think for me, that's one of the reasons that all of my Kickstarters have done well, because I take risks with every game I design, and with every Kickstarter I run, I do things differently. And there are rules that people say you have to follow, which I break. So my first Kickstarter, it wasn't a small game. It was a big box fantasy adventure game. But even though it was a big, expensive game, it didn't have any miniatures in it, because I truly believed that you didn't need to have all of this plastic to make these games work on Kickstarter. Everyone said to me back then, you can't release a game this big with this style of stuff and not have miniatures in it. But that was a risk I wanted to take, and it worked like really well for me. Having the family and advanced versions in the Isle of Cats is a huge risk. How many games do you buy that have two different rule books in the game, which have two ways of playing them? Because often you'll say, design the best approach for the game. And my answer with the Isle of Cats was, this is the best approach for an 8-year-old, and this is the best approach for a 20-year-old. So that's what I did. But those risks, as you say, you have to be able to test them. You have to be able to validate them. But sometimes breaking the mold is what helps you kind of just get that one step up over everyone else.
I think it helps with the evolution of the industry as well, right? So if you look at when we're kids and it was Monopoly and Risk and Othello and kind of the Clue and the basics, to where we are now in the indie industry, it's each kind of generation of games is built on the one prior to it, and it's these new innovations that are getting adopted by other games and twisted and turned and appropriated in different ways, which is, I think, creating these interesting combinations and playability of games that we're seeing now in the marketplace.
And you see it at every level, and it's just great, as you say, that evolution. Like 5 years ago, or maybe 3 years ago, Cool Mini or Not, they were the big kind of miniature Kickstarter company. These days, you might argue that Awaken Realms has overtaken them, because they're now the company doing these big kind of things. And it's not that Cool Mini or Not are suddenly like doing something different. It's just the fact that this new companies try to innovate on top of what they're doing. And in a few years' time, I can guarantee you there'll be another company that's probably sat above Awaken Realms doing something slightly different and doing the $5 million Kickstarters.
What's exciting, though, is it keeps evolving. What is the biggest thing, or I'd say the one consistent thing you've done across all your campaigns you think you can attribute to helping you with your campaigns? Like, is there one thing you can kind of put your thumb on, saying, you know what, every time I do a campaign, I have to make sure I do that, because that's one of the keys to making sure that I continue to grow my fan base?
For me, it's going back to the roots that I am Frank West, and I am a one-man band who's doing this because it's a passion thing, and this is me. I don't try and come across as if I'm a company. I don't try and come across as if I'm a business. I put my face on everything. I do live streams. I do videos where it's me in the videos. I personally respond to every comment. Every single update is written by me, and it's about making people feel like they have a connection with me, because for me, I want that. My backers are my friends, right? They're people who I interact with on a daily basis during these campaigns. And it's not about trying to sell them something. It's about creating a friendship, a community where they know who I am. And for me, I think that people like that honesty. They like that genuine approach. And it's something where, you put yourself on the line, because you have to be honest. You can't lie, because eventually you'll fall down. You have to just speak and be you. But if you can do that, people will start to trust you. And the moment you stutter or you fall down, they'll support you, because they know that you're just trying to be you, and you're not trying to pretend to be something that you're not.
No, that's a good point. What is next on the deck for you? Do you have what's coming from Frank West next? What's the next thing you're working on?
So this year is going to be a focus on expanding the Isle of Cats side of things. So
Okay, cool.
there are new expansions, new games. We've not really announced what yet, but there's more stuff in that side of kind of the line. And then next year will be something completely different. But this year it's really growing and expanding that kind of existing IP.
Well, certainly, Frank, I would say you're an inspiration to others. Certainly, anybody that is considering launching a campaign should first go check out all your campaigns, because I think you've really hit it on the head. And clearly, you've hit a track that seems to be at least giving you a consistent track record of success. So I want to congratulate you on that, and wish you all the best this upcoming year. And I can't wait to see your next game.
No, I appreciate it. And people are always welcome to reach out to me and kind of ask questions and stuff. I'm always happy to share and discuss kind of.
So how do they do that? Is there like a page or an email? How best would they reach out to you?
So the best way is the website, which is thecityofgames.com. On there, you can find a contact page that has my email, and also it has our Twitter and Facebook. But most things are under City of Games HQ. So go to your favorite social platform, City of Games HQ, and if you message them, you'll always get hold of me directly.
Oh, that's awesome. Frank, all the best to you and your family this year, eh?
Cool. Thank you, and to yourself.
Cheers. Ciao. This has been an episode of the Board Game Binge podcast, hosted by James Staley, produced by James Staley and Mike Bruner, with original music by Nick Smith. If you would like to watch these interviews live, simply join the Facebook group Board Game Binge, and you'll get access to live interviews, giveaways, and interesting board game content from across the industry. I can't wait for you to join us. See you next time.